this, but I don't really want to do a traditional sort of like, this is who I think will come first, this is who I think will come second, sort of prediction anyway. What I want to do is I'm just going to go team by team. I'm going to give you a range of how many wins I think that team will get this season. And I'm going to give you what I think the theme of their season will be, or what I think the story of their season will be. And then list some key players for those teams. And full disclosure, I am a Portland Trail Blazers fan. Because of time zone differences with me living in Australia, I rarely, if ever, get to watch East Coast basketball except for when they are playing a West Coast team, so I have a lot more knowledge about West Coast teams than I do East Coast teams, just to put that out there right now. We're going to start with the Atlanta Hawks. This is a team I don't know too much about, really, to be honest with you. Ever since that Knicks series they had a few years back, I've kind of just fallen off, because they kind of seemed like a team that was sort of stuck somewhere in the middle. Like, the Hawks were never good enough to, like, force me to pay attention, but they weren't bad enough to where they were irrelevant. I predict that the Hawks are going to get 40 to 45 wins this season, and I think that the theme of this season is time to earn respect. Time to earn respect. And I have their key players. This is a little bit obvious, but Trae Young, of course, DeJounte Murray, Bogdanovich, and Clint Capella. Boston Celtics are up next. And the Boston Celtics are actually who I have projected to be the 1 seed in the East. I think they're going to be the points leaders in the Eastern Conference. And I project that the Boston Celtics will have 55 to 60 wins this season. 55 to 60 wins. And I think that the theme of the season for the Boston Celtics is going all in. Obviously, they had Jason Tatum, they had Jaylen Brown, but they brought in Drew Holiday from the Trailblazers in that trade. They brought in Kristaps Porzingis in the offseason. You have another year of development on Derek White, who's proven to be a very valuable piece for them. And me personally, I know the Milwaukee Bucks get a lot of, talk about them. They've looked good so far this season, but I personally think that the Boston Celtics are the best team in the East. I think the ceiling for this team is the NBA Finals, and I think the floor, the absolute lowest point the Celtics team can be, is a second round exit. The Brooklyn Nets, I predict the Brooklyn Nets to have 30 to 40 wins this season, anywhere between 30 and 40 wins. And the theme of the season for the Brooklyn Nets is going to be Ben Simmons. What happens with Ben Simmons? Does he get traded? Does he get better? What happens with him? Because this is a team that is in a really weird spot. They're like a year removed from having Kyrie, Harden, and KD. And now they have Mikal Bridges, they have Claxton, they have Cam Thomas, who's looked like a beast. So it's a team that's building a new identity. And part of that identity is going to be how Ben Simmons pans out with this team. Next up, the Charlotte Hornets. I think they will have between 30 and 35 wins. The Charlotte Hornets. And the theme of this season, or the Charlotte Hornets, will be dysfunction in the Queen City. You have a lot of behind-the-scenes stuff going on with a lot of players on this team. see how that off-court trauma plays into their on-court performance. Key players for the Hornets: LaMelo Ball, Miller, the rookie, who already is having some legal issues, Terry Rozier, PJ Washington. Those are guys to keep an eye out on for the Hornets. The Chicago Bulls, this is another team that I predict to have between 30 and 35 wins. And I actually have a couple different storylines or focuses of this season for the Bulls. Which way do they go, / what is their team identity? And also Lonzo Ball's health. He's saying he thinks he can, come back at some point. Other people are saying his career is over. And the team's kind of in a weird spot. They're not really good enough to win. They're not bad enough to tank. Their roster, they have some good pieces, but they're not really young. So it's going to be interesting to see if the Bulls pick a direction this season. Do they blow it up? Do they trade some of these guys? Do they just kind of stay on the treadmill? Some key pieces for this team: DeMar DeRozan, Alex Caruso, Zach LaVine, Vucevic, Kobe White. Next up, the Cleveland Cavaliers. I predict them to have between 45 and 50 wins this season. And the real theme for them will be, did they learn from last year? They had a great regular season last year, then they kind of got humbled in the playoffs. And the question will be, can they learn and grow from that humbling experience, and can they be even better this year? Some key guys for the Cavaliers: Jared Allen, Darius Garland, Donovan Mitchell, Karis LeVert, and Mobley. The Dallas Mavericks, probably my second favorite team to watch in the NBA. I just love watching the Mavericks play. I predict that they will get between 40 and 45 wins this season. And the big question for the Mavericks is, can Luka and Kyrie make it work? Last season at the trade deadline, they brought in Kyrie Irving, and the Mavericks ended up missing the playoffs, even though it was seen as a win-now move at the time. I have a lot of issues with the roster construction of the Mavericks, particularly when it comes to center and small forward. I just think their roster doesn't really make sense, and it doesn't really have the kind of guys on the roster that Luka needs to succeed with his skill set. But some of their key guys: Luka Doncic, Kyrie Irving, Seth Curry, you have Green, DHJ, you have Hardy, some young guys in there. Next up, we're talking about the champs, the Denver Nuggets. I predict them to have between 45 and 55 wins this season. And the big question for the Nuggets is, can they go back to back? I personally think they are the best team in the West. I think the ceiling for this team is the NBA Finals, and I think the absolute floor for this team is probably also a second round exit. I think of them similarly as I think of the Boston Celtics. Obviously some key pieces for them: Nikola Jokic, KCP, who just absolutely went off against the Lakers. Like, the fact that Denver's turned KCP from like an average role player into like a legit glue guy is crazy. Aaron Gordon, Jamal Murray, MPJ. But yeah, I still think Denver's the best in the West, personally. Next up, the Detroit Pistons. I think that they'll get between 20 and 30 wins this season. I think they're definitely going to be back in that lottery. But that's kind of where they need to be. They just kind of need to keep building up their pieces. And the theme of this season will be improvement over last year. Some of their key guys, Bagley, Bojan, Cade Cunningham, Jalen Duren, Hayes, Ivy. They have a lot of young guys on that team. They just need to start, getting them reps, letting them, grow. Let some of those guys start to turn the corner, bring in some new blood as well to go with them. But this isn't their year, but they're a couple away. The Golden State Warriors, I predict between 35 and 45 wins for the Warriors. And the big theme of this season will be the last hurrah of the big three, potentially. Is this the last time we see, is this the last season that Steph Curry, Klay Thompson, and Draymond Green are all playing together in Golden State? I think it's very possible that at least one of those guys is gone next season. I could potentially see both Klay Thompson and Draymond Green being on different teams next year. That's not outside that. I think Steph Curry will never wear another jersey, but I could see Klay and Draymond potentially going somewhere else. So this season it might be the last hurrah. And the key players for them: Steph Curry, of course, Klay Thompson, Draymond Green, Jonathan Kuminga, Chris Paul, and Wiggins. Houston Rockets between 25 and 35 wins is what I predict for them. And the big storylines of the season for Houston will be chemistry with the young guys and Dillon Brooks. Everyone kind of scratched their head when Houston brought in Dillon Brooks for a young team that's rebuilding, bringing a guy who's gonna just chuck up shots, is gonna hog the ball's gonna die in his hands. In my personal opinion, it doesn't really make sense. Like that Dillon Brooks deal in Houston really did not make sense to me. But we'll see what happens with Brooks there in Houston. Maybe he'll make me eat my words there, I don't know. But key players of that team: Jalen Green, Alperen Sengun, Jabari, Amen Thompson, Fred VanVleet. Like, they got some nice pieces. I think the Houston Rockets could be like a 7th or 8th seed, or even a play-in team, at the absolute best. But I could also see an eventuality where they're in the bottom 4, bottom 3 of the West. Indiana Pacers, who as of the time of me recording this video are actually number 1 in the Eastern Conference. The Indiana Pacers, I think they'll get between 35 and 40 wins. This is actually a really exciting team, but because it's the Indiana Pacers, they aren't getting that much media attention. And the theme of the season for them is, are they ready to make a splash? You got Tyrese Halliburton, who's an absolute all-star. Buddy Hield. You have Brown, you have Benedict Mathurin, you have Obi Toppin, Miles Turner. I think the Indiana Pacers have a legit squad. They have a really good starting 5, a little bit of depth. I think they're going to be a playoff team, and I think they're going to be a tough first-round matchup for whoever gets them. I don't know if they necessarily win a round, but the Indiana Pacers will be an exciting team this season for sure. The Los Angeles Clippers, I think they're going to get between 45 and 50 wins. And the big storyline of this season is, will the big three stay healthy? You have Kawhi, you have PG, and you have Russ, and Kawhi and PG especially have had a lot of injury concerns. When all those guys are healthy, I think they are a top 4 team in the West. If they have a fully healthy lineup, their perimeter defense is insane. They force guys into the middle. They have an amazing defensive system there when they're healthy, but is, of course, the question, can they stay healthy? To this point, they've not been able to. If they can stay healthy, I think they're sealing Western Conference Final. If they can't, I think the floor of this team is out in the first round. The key players for them, Kawhi Leonard, of course, Paul George, Russell Westbrook, Bones Highland, who's becoming a beast in his own right, Robert Covington, and Norm Powell. And the other team in Los Angeles, the Lakers, I think they will get between 40 and 45 wins this season. And the big storyline is this going to be the Kings' last ride in LA? LeBron touched slightly on retirement last year, but never really was that serious about it. I don't think he'll retire this season, but I do think it's possible this is last season in LA. He's talked about wanting to play a season with Bronny before retiring. I believe Bronny is draft eligible this year, so I think that whoever ends up signing LeBron James Jr. might also be getting the final season of LeBron with them. But I think this might be his last year in LA. I could see him asking. I don't know if his contract's up, or if he'd be asking for a trade, but yeah, this might be the last year of Braun in Los Angeles. I think this team could be a Western Conference Finals team at best. At worst, I think they're a play-in team. Braun, AD, Rui, Reeves, D'Lo, Vanderbilt, and Wood are guys identified as key players for the Los Angeles Lakers. Next up, we have the Memphis Grizzlies. I think they'll get between 40 and 50 wins this season. And the theme of this season will be no jaw, yes problems. Very excited about that headline. And Steven Adams being out, most likely for this season. Obviously, John Morant will not be playing to start the season. I actually don't know when his suspension's up. Let me look at that. When is it? He has a 25-game suspension, so I mean, yeah, depending on how the Grizzlies start, they might be deep in the bottom of the standings and have to dig themselves up a pretty big hole once he gets back. Especially with Steven Adams being out, they could be past the point of no return by the time Ja gets healthy, but we'll have to wait and see. You know, I think the ceiling for this Grizzlies team is like between a 4 and a 6 seed, and I think the bottom is out of the playoffs. Key players of this team: John Morant, Bane, Triple J, Luke Kennard, Aldama, and Marcus Smart. Next up, excuse me, I had to clear my throat. I had a cough there. I want to talk about the Miami Heat. I think the Miami Heat will get between 40 and 45 wins this season. And the theme will be, can they do it again? And can they do it in the regular season? They've been to the finals I think 3 of the last 5 times or something like that, if I'm remembering correctly. But, you know, the team has been very successful, even though they have been fairly conservative in the trades they're making. Obviously, the Dame trade not happening was a big thing this offseason, with him not going to the Miami Heat. When I talk about the regular season, it's because I always feel like this is a team that's built for playoff success. The way the game is played in the playoffs is a little bit different, and especially Jimmy Butler really shows up in the playoffs, but in the regular season, you know, I feel like they maybe have a tendency to sleepwalk a little bit. And I think the key players for the team, pretty obvious: Jimmy Butler, Bam Adebayo, Harrow, and Next up, we have the Milwaukee Bucks. I think the Bucks will have between 45 and 55 wins this season. And I think the theme of their season will be health and age. I said this in my Dame trade video, but a lot of people are saying this Bucks team, they have very high expectations for them, and I understand why they do. But I personally think health and age could be a factor for this team. Damian Lillard's getting up there. He's in his, mid-ish 30s now. And he really relies on his athleticism to get to the basket. Everybody knows Dame's a good shooter. But when he tries, when he's driven to the basket, that's all first step. That's explosiveness. And Brook Lopez is your starting center. He's getting older. I don't know if he has injury issues, but I feel like he's had a few recently. You have Middleton, who's a starter. He's had some injury issues. So I look at that roster and I'm like, there's a lot of old guys on this roster. Giannis is young, but like when we get down to the end of the season, when we get into the playoffs, are all of these guys gonna be healthy? Are they all gonna be ready to go? Or if they do play, will they be playing with like a bum ankle or something? Like, I feel like this team is gonna have one or two major injuries before the end of the year. Like, I could see a Dame knee injury or a Middleton ankle injury or something, like completely derailing this team and people like being blindsided by it. But I think the ceiling for the Bucks is an NBA Finals, and I think the absolute floor for this team is like a 5th seed. But I don't think they miss the playoffs or anything like that. But the floor would maybe like a 2nd round exit, But I don't know. I just have a feeling their starting lineup is not gonna all be healthy enough to start game 1 of the playoffs. Just a feeling I have. Milwaukee Bucks, their core players are Damian Lillard, Giannis Antetokounmpo, Brook Lopez, Chris Middleton, and Bochum. I think it's French. I don't know. Minnesota Timberwolves, I think between 35 and 40 wins for them. And the storyline this season will be, can Gobert step it up? Obviously, year 1 of them bringing in Gobert did not work out as they were hoping. Him and Cat paired together on the floor. Maybe an entire season together plus an off season. Will Gobert and Karl Anthony Towns start working better together? I don't know. I still think that team has way too many bigs and not enough good guards. Obviously you have like one good guard, Anthony Edwards, but beyond that, they have too many bigs. But your key players there, obviously Anthony Edwards, Cat, Gobert, Naz Reid, McDaniels. The New Orleans Pelicans, between 35 and 45 wins. And the storyline this season will all be about Zion and if Zion Williamson can stay healthy. Because to this point he's not proven that he can. If Zion can stay healthy, I think the Pelicans are one of the better teams in the West. They have a lot of depth, they have good players at every position. I think they could be a best case scenario. Their ceiling is like a top 4 seed. Their absolute ceiling is like a Western Conference final. Their floor is being a play-in team. But realistically I could see them, winning a round or something. Zion's healthy, but yeah, Zion, CJ, B.I., Daniels, Jose, Herb. Those are your key players there. Nola. Next up, the Knicks. I think the Knicks this season. And the storylines of Knicks will be, what kind of player is RJ going to be? Because it's time for him to make that leap if he's going to. To this point, he's been a little bit underwhelming. And can Josh Hart keep it going? Josh Hart had an amazing end of the season last year. After being traded to the New York Knicks, he became the heart and soul of that team. And if he can keep that going, the New York Knicks are going to be a good team. Key players for them: RJ Barrett, Brunson, Grimes, Hart, Quickly, Randall, Mitchell Robinson. In my opinion, Mitchell Robinson, one of the most underrated centers in the NBA. Next up, we're going to talk about the Oklahoma City Thunder. And they have the widest range of any team on my list. I think they get between 35 and 50 wins, depending on, in my opinion, this team is going to have the largest variance in the NBA. Like, their floor and ceiling are massively wide apart. The OKC Thunder and their absolute ceiling, I think, is like potentially a conference finals team. They have so much talent, but at their floor, they missed the playoffs entirely. Like, this team has so much variance. It's really hard for me to accurately predict how good I think they're gonna be. And the theme for this season is going to be, are they ready to make the push? They have Chet. Chet's looked really good early. Can Chet stay healthy? They have Dort. Of course, they have Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, one of the best young point guards in the NBA. He's right up there with, it's like him and Tyrese, like, just dogs. And then, of course, Josh Giddey. Like, they have so much talent, but the question is, can they put that all together? And can they stay healthy? Are they ready to make the push? And if they can, this team can make a lot of noise. A lot of noise. Just depends on if they're ready or not. Next up, we do Orlando Magic. And I predict they will get between 35 and 40 wins. And the big question with the Magic is, are they good enough for the playoffs? Some of their key players: Cole Anthony, Paolo Banchero, Wendell, Fultz, Gary Harris. Where did they finish last season? They were 13th. This is going to be my only bold prediction of the video. I think the Magic make the play-in. I think the Magic make the play-in this year. Next up, the 76ers. I think the Philadelphia 76ers will get between 40 and 45 wins this season. And the big storyline for them is going to be James Harden. He's demanded a trade. He's not showing up for practices. He's not playing in games. He says he doesn't want to talk to Morey. That bridge has been burned. What happens with Harden? That's the entire story of the season for the Sixers until he's gone. And it might be the death of the process in the process getting rid of Harden. It might be the death of the process. For them, key players: Embiid, Harris, and Maxey. Those are really the only guys. I'm like, those are the guys. Yeah. Phoenix Suns. I predict them to get between 50 and 60 wins. And the question is, can they dethrone Denver as the best in the West? I think at their absolute ceiling, the Suns are a NBA Finals team. At their worst, I think they're between a 4th and a 6th seed, and they lose in the second round. Their key players: Booker, KD, Beal, Nurk. I don't know Trailblazers, the team that I predicted to win the least amount of games on this entire board. I think the Portland Trailblazers win between 15 and 25 games this season. And the story of the season will just be develop and draft and trading Malcolm Brogdon at the deadline. And where does he end up? My personal prediction is Malcolm Brogdon's going to be traded to the Miami Heat, just for the meme of it. But yeah, the Blazers are going to suck this season. We've sucked so far. It's an entire team of young guys. It is what it is. I've been asking for a rebuild for years. I got a rebuild. So it's a rebuilding year, and it's the start of the rebuild, which is the most painful year, is year one. Key players for the Trailblazers: Scoot, Ant, Sharp, Kamara. Too many Kamara, who already looks like the key piece in that Phoenix Suns trade for Nurkic. Like, he's a rookie. He's really impressed me a lot. His defense is great. His basketball IQ is great. Like, I'm really excited for too many Kamara, Ayton, and Grant. I also think Grant might get moved to the deadline. I don't know. Sacramento Kings, I think they end up between 40 and 45 wins, and the big storyline for the Kings will be, was the off-season good enough? A lot of people praised their off-season. I personally feel like they didn't do enough. All they did was add depth. I don't know if that's enough to be up there with the Nuggets or the Suns. I just don't know. Key players for the Kings: De'Aaron Fox, Herter, Edwards, Murray, Sabonis. Alright, San Antonio Spurs, between 20 and 25 wins. The entire theme of this season for them is going to be keep Wemby healthy and develop him. You know, we've seen flashes. We saw what he can do in preseason. He's looked decent in the regular season so far. Not super impressive, but still he looks good. And this whole season is going to be about developing him, turning him into the player he's meant to be. Key players for the Spurs: Wemby, of course, Zach Collins, Keldon Johnson, Sochan, Devin Vassell. They have a lot of good players. A lot of them are bigs. They might end up in a situation where there's a log jam. They have to get rid of one or two of those guys. We'll have to see. The Toronto Raptors, I think they'll win between 35 and 45 games, and the theme of this season is which direction do they go? Do they build? Do they move guys? Mainly, I'm talking about, do they move OG? Do they move Pascal? Do they move Gary Trent? You know, do they try and build on their young pieces like Scotty Barnes and Dick Grady? Or do they just kind of stay in this, you know, middle of the pack spot they're in right now? I don't know what the Raptors are going to do, but I think they have to make a choice. For the Raptors, their key players: OG Anunoby, Scotty Barnes, Dick Grady, Pascal Siakam, Gary Trent Jr. Those are the guys I think of when I think of the Raptors right now. Utah Jazz, I think they'll win between 35 and 45 wins. And the real storyline for them is just how good are you in the Western Conference. I think they're going to end between the 3 and the 7 spot, somewhere in there. For the Jazz, key players: Clarkson, Collins. They got him from Atlanta. Walker Kessler, another year development for him. Lowry Markkanen, Sexton. They'll be good. The question is how good in a very competitive Western Conference. And finally, the Washington Wizards is kind of a cop-out for me, but I think between 20 and 30 wins, and the question for me is just, what is their identity? Is it just Jordan Poole and Kuzma chucking shots, or, you know, what is it? Because right now it just looks like it's Kuzma and Poole chucking shots. But for me, well in Washington. I really want Denny on the Blazers. I've been a huge Denny fan since EuroLeague days, because I watch a little bit of Maccabi, so Denny's been on my radar for a long time. Gafford, Gallo, Goose, Poole. Those are the key guys for Washington. But yeah, guys, not a traditional predictions video, but I do hope you at least found it interesting, a little different than usual, but I'd love to hear what you think about what I had to say here today, if you agree or disagree with any of my takes. If you liked the video, though, please subscribe to the channel. Leave a thumbs up. Leave a thumbs up. And subscribe to the channel for more content just like this almost every single day. Until next time, guys. Bye-bye.